figure and challenges by our esteemed guest, Gurumurthy ji. Please make sure during this presentation and question answer, mute your phone or your chat. You can, if you have any question, please write them in the chat with your name. At this time, I have a pleasure to present to you our esteemed leader, the International President of Friends of India Society, Dr. Bhishma Agnihotri. Dr. Agnihotri has a long list of accomplishments and credentials to his credit. Just to mention a few, he was the youngest person to be selected on a competitive basis as a judge in India. He served as the first person of India origin to head an American law school and was dean and chancellor for the longest tenure in American law school. He served various organizations in the service of community at large. Just to mention few, he was the first president of HSS, General Secretary of World Fellowship of Religions, honorary advisor and attorney to OPI for a long time, and many more. Dr. Agnihotri was appointed as the first ambassador at large by the government of India in 2001. He traveled the world in strengthening the ties of NRIs from all backgrounds, gender, and religion to our motherland, India. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to invite Dr. Bhishma Agnihotri.
Vivek ji, thank you very much. You are a very wakeful person, looks like. You shouldn't say so many things about me. We have a person here which has done so much for Bharat and for us, for me, for all his colleagues, his friends, his other people who are not his friends. That's unthinkable that I can just not talk a little bit more about it. I have before me a lot of documents here mentioning his accomplishments, but I can mention a few of them at this time. Let me read something that Gurumurthy ji is a chartered accountant and corporate and legal advisor of high standing. Gurumurthy is a very well-known advisor to many corporations, corporate law and finance, and also macroeconomics issues affecting corporates as well as activists too. He is co-convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, which espouses economic and nationalism. He sees himself as an ardent proponent of Indian economics and believes in the virtues of economic self-reliance. Gurumurthy ji is highly popular as a writer and journalist in India, celebrated for his investigative journalism. He has ceaselessly campaigned against corruption at high places, exposing the bribery in befores, arms deals, and the nexus between corporates and the government. Gurumurthy ji is the visiting faculty member of IIT Bombay in the domains of economics, finance, and management. He is also the distinguished professor legal anthropology in Sastra University. See, Gurumurthy was consistently seen by the media as the powerful from 1990 till now. The Business Baron magazine rated Shri Gurumurthy's knowledge of economics, finance, and accounts as outstanding. He was rated among 50 most powerful persons in India in 1990. And then again, 8th more powerful person, person. He has so many records above that, unbelievable. 70th more powerful person in another magazine, and 50th as the 50th most powerful person in India, the 24th powerful person in India, and so on, and the 30th most powerful person in India. All these various things he has been doing.
Prem,
But believe
Menon,
me,
MENON.
Join the
pardon?
meeting.
Otherwise, this is something not very big, honestly. He has done something for Indian polity which nobody has done. He is profound in his vision. He's a great organizer, and he has developed friendship with almost everybody, for and against. And everybody knows his powerful presentation and his powerful understanding of every issue involved is unmatched by anybody. But the latest thing he has been very much involved is as the chairman of the Vivekananda International Foundation, a foremost think tank of India. He has provided thoughtful leadership to that group, a very powerful group. I know a lot of them, but I admire a lot of them. But he has been a very powerful force as a leader. And his recent writing, or whatever you may call it, presentation or writing, is very interesting. And you must have the copy of it. I think we sent you a copy of that document, which is worth reading. I read it myself after I got it here. And it is a 64-page running page document on random thoughts. His random thoughts are random, but not just casual. They are very deep. They cover a lot of issues facing us in India and elsewhere. So I enjoy reading it. And I think you should, whenever you get time, you should read it. So we thought this is a very strange time in India, very disturbing time. And I read the article which Dr. Gurumurthy wrote in the paper, and I thought he is the man to come to us and talk to us about what is happening in India at this time, where we are going, why we are going where we are going, and how we can get out of it. So therefore, without talking too much, I have a request of our wonderful guest, a great organizer, great visionary, Shri Gurumurthy ji. Gurumurthy ji.
Namaskar.
Namaskar.
Bhishma ji, you had actually raised the bar as to how I should make a presentation today, because when you introduce a person with such adjectives, it becomes difficult for the person to underperform. So you must understand you have not done me a favor by introducing me with such high-flown words. See, the context in which we are talking today is the challenge that India is facing in handling the COVID issue. And the sudden surge which we witnessed towards the end of middle of March onwards, and how deep and how far and how high it will go is a question mark, and no expert has been able to warn India from within or outside. This is the most important thing. Actually, if I had mentioned it, it would not have been of great use. It is Dr. Arun Kumar, a leftist scholar, who's a professor of economics in JNU. He has written 6 reasons where, as a whole, it's not just any government or system or policy which is at fault. It is the entire ecosystem which was built when the COVID
Join the meeting.
levels began declining. So it lulled us into some kind of complacency. This is the most important thing. Everybody thought, even the world thought, India had overcome the challenge of COVID. This was sometime in January, February. And to that extent that the health minister of India even declared that we have flattened the curve. This was on the 15th of February. But suddenly from March, things changed dramatically. And, of course, outside India, the headline givers do not understand what is happening in deeper India. And so they look at the headlines and then connect to another headline and say, this is the reason. And the world discourse on India, particularly the Western discourse, has been so casual and so superficial and so prejudicial to the cause of truth that unless we study in depth, even within India, in-depth study is lacking because of the polarized situation in which this government has been functioning. This polarization became inevitable because of 5-6 decades of politics, which suppressed India from within. And so when India was coming out in such a big way, it caused polarization. It was bound to happen. And in the polarization, the main casualty became the truth. We must understand that in any polarized situation, truth will be the casualty. And I am putting it not just in the context of COVID, which I will immediately come to. In the context of everything that is happening in India, truth is a casualty. So when your responsibility is very high because you are operating in an ecosystem where the headlines which are there in newspapers become the headlines of the world. So you have a very heavy responsibility to understand what's happening in India and work on a narrative. See, narrative is a very, very difficult task. It requires a one-liner on a country. It's impossible. If you say China is it's a communist country, it's a narrative. It's a Confucian country, it's over. And if you say Japan is a shogun samurai nation, it's over. It describes. But India cannot be described in one line, in one word. It's too complex, too vast, and too much of a confused scenario, because if you put India on the one side, the rest of the world on this other, you see more of a diversity in India than the rest of the world put together. So we have a very, very, actually this is going to be the future of the world, that you live in such diversity. In Japan in 2017, when I had gone, a question was put to me in a conference. How is it that India is able to work a democracy when there is so much of diversity? I said that I'm surprised at this question because democracy works and is needed only in diversity. In any homogeneous society, democracy means merely a question of who should be the president or prime minister. But in India, democracy has been for ages as a clash of ideas. It's not just a clash of persons. So I said that there is no particular role model for India. Take, for instance, Rama was hailed as the greatest person because he obeyed his father. And Prahlada was hailed as great because he defied his father. Sita was hailed as great because she obeyed her husband. Meera was hailed as great because she defied her husband. India can work with the bandwidth of unbelievable contradictions. So democracy means tolerance of the extremes. That is the essence of the civilizational democracy of India, about which I will tell a little later. But for us to understand this and tell the world, it requires an immense understanding of not only contemporary India, but also the traditional India, where we are able to have a confluence of both the tradition and the contemporary world. And we are ourselves greatly lacking in this understanding is one of the things which I notice in the discourse of the Indians within India, as well as those who are operating outside India. Of course, they are limited, they are having very limited information. Now, coming to what has now focused India in is not just the COVID surge, but the oxygen crisis. The entire India has been packed into this. That so many people died because of lack of oxygen. It's an underdeveloped country. It is this, it is that. And the Indian newspapers contributed in no small measure. Indian courts, which are supposed to look at the facts, not look at things emotionally and instant reaction without any paper on the table, they also began reacting as human beings would normally when there is a death, when there is an issue. So ultimately, India has been branded as a country which is incapable of even managing the emergency needs of an oxygen as a nation. So where is the fault? How it happened? Unless we go into this, you cannot fathom the superficiality of the discourse and the intent of the discourse. Both we must understand. So if you look at what happened, the COVID surge took place last time. There was even a demand that all these hospitals should be nationalized because they charge something like 75,000 rupees per day per patient, in which 5 to 10,000 is the amount charged for oxygen and for ventilators. And the newspaper which came out with this demand was the Congress newspaper called the National Herald. So that was the extent of anger against the hospitals. And in fact, the government had to intervene, cut down the rates, which the government had no power to do. It had only a persuasive power. In India, you can't legislate, this is the amount you should charge. So when this was happening, then suddenly the COVID crisis, I mean, it hit Delhi in a manner no one in Delhi imagined. In a matter of 40 days, 300,000 people were infected with COVID, and 10% of them were seeking admission in hospitals. And there is no hospital space. No country could afford that kind of surge to be hospitalized within such a short period of time, because the lead time for COVID treatment is minimum 7 days and it can extend up to 10, 12 days. In this lead time, for so many people to be accommodated in hospital is impossible in any country. Nobody went into it. And this crisis was only in places which are remotely connected to oxygen supply. The oxygen supply in India, India has enough oxygen. We produce 100,000 tons of oxygen per day. One corporate itself is producing 22,000 tons of oxygen every day. We require only 1% of it for medical oxygen purposes. But the sources are so far off. It is produced in Tuticorin, it is produced in the East Coast, it is produced in West Coast, but it is needed in Delhi. And the hospitals which are using it and which are in the news and which went to the court are private hospitals which are charging 10,000, 5,000 per day for oxygen supply for patients. The question is, why did they not stock this? Minimum stock you didn't have. And you go to the court and say, Mr. Government, you have to give me oxygen. The government is not a controlled commodity. It is not in the hands of the government. The government can only make policies for oxygen, and you can't make policy and overcome the logistic issues in a matter of 15 days or 20 days, because they don't know how much stock you have. You are supposed to estimate it. This has been brought out in a research paper, 3 experts in Kerala, how the hospitals in India are absolutely unprepared on oxygen supply. That they don't bother. That such a life-saving commodity is not stocked enough, and the sources are too remote and almost one, because each of these hospital managements make some money on the side on oxygen supply. This is all in the open. It has come out also. But after the COVID crisis last time, the government woke up. They thought that this is a big lacuna, and the Prime Minister issued check of over 220 crores, asking the hospital to install their own domestic oxygen production, which means each one of the hospitals will have their own backyard oxygen supply. And the cost of this equipment is about 50-60 lakhs. This has come out in the print, and they have written, print is not a great supporter of the government. They have themselves written, yes, the government made this policy. 162 plants were sanctioned in different places in India. And if these had been installed, then there would be no problem of oxygen supply. In Delhi, some 12 or 13 hospitals were made this offer. Out of 162 for which the government had made orders, and the people went there to install the oxygen plants. They were told we have no space, because the space is being used for making money by creating more beds. If such a fundamental thing as oxygen cannot be accommodated within the premises of the hospital, and you don't also order sufficient quantity of oxygen for emergency use, then your hospital is doing damage to patients. This never came out, and these are the people who complained. They went and said, give us oxygen. It's your duty to procure oxygen and keep it. Even then, the government never said, gentlemen, it is your responsibility, not ours. Then they put together all the acts, but the logistics is that you can't fly oxygen. If you take oxygen by aircraft, it will burst. You have to travel only along the road. And the distance is minimum 500 to maximum 600 kilometers. And it has to be liquefied. It cannot be transported just like that. It has to be transported in a safe manner. None of this came out in the discourse. All these facts were cast aside. Because even the courts began talking like that, the media began repeating. And even if the government had said that it is your responsibility, everybody will say the government is passing on the buck. But this is not the way discourse and debates have to take place. So we actually were caught in a situation, unless there is a very fair assessment of the facts, the responsibilities, where the failure was, how the search took place, how it overtook everybody. Even the experts could not make a guess about what would happen. This all, some important, as I said, Dr. Arun Kumar has written about it. But India was projected as a nation which is incapable of doing such a small thing, as a result of which almost 100 people have died. So this is something on which at least the Indian community, which is not a pushover anymore, we are there in sufficient numbers and in respectable quality, that if we apprise ourselves of what the facts are, then we will be able to handle this. So the whole issue can be reduced into 4, 5, 6 propositions. First, there is no question of shortage in oxygen supply in India, period. And there is no question of there is a minuscule part of what we produce as oxygen is needed for medical use. The issue is logistics. And it is a private commodity. It is not a public good. If there is no water and people die, the government is responsible, because water is a public good. The government is supposed to control it. And once you have privatized the hospitals, and the private hospitals hold fort in the so-called middle and upper middle class, which is the most vocal segment of the public, it is their responsibility to do it. And they very cleverly put the burden on the government by going to the court, and the court saying, gentlemen, you are blaming the wrong person. You are supposed to do it. If the court had done this, then the whole matter would not have erupted. The court began pointing hands at the government. It's all out of ignorance. With the result, we are handling a debranded, devalued national image today. This we must understand, it's a big responsibility. and the government alone cannot handle it. And now, no oxygen shortage, and it is purely a question of logistics. It is the failure of the people who did not stock sufficient quantity of oxygen. The government made policies that you can have oxygen at the backyard. I'm willing to give you the money. They issued the check, placed the orders, asked the plants to go and locate the system in the respective hospitals. The hospital, only 33 hospitals out of 162 accepted this offer. The rest said no. The Delhi government did not install even one out of some 12 or 13 that was sanctioned. And most of these big corporate hospitals, which make tons and tons of money, this cost about 60 lakhs or 70 lakhs in Indian rupee. You can understand what it means in dollars. And the payback time is just 18 months. The only thing is you don't want to allocate the real estate space for the oxygen. So much needed for treating emergency patients, because you want to make money on that space by creating more beds and not allocate space for producing oxygen. You know, this in normal situation, it wouldn't have mattered. But you cannot now say the government has failed to make a law that every hospital must produce oxygen. Because of that, it is a failure of the government, because this is an unforeseen situation. An emergency requirement had become a normal requirement in a space of 15 days. That is what caused the crisis. And this, at least, we must be able to understand. And the media hyped, actually, because the courts came out with oral announcements, which any judicial mind should have avoided. It's very unfortunate that, because when the media reflects even the judiciary also sails in line with the media. And I said the media is polarized in India, and they only need a small fault in the Modi government. Even if there is no fault, paste it and comment on the government. Had become the media discourse model in India. And that is what focused India in a small matter of, for example, if you take Maharashtra, 20 people died because of oxygen leak. That's an accident. In the same way, oxygen is not there is an accident. Emergency requirement exploded so much that what was needed for that you have stock for 40 persons and suddenly 4,000 patients have come is an accident. You are not prepared for an accident. It's like a tsunami. But this is not how the media viewed, courts viewed, world viewed. So we must understand that in a context, those who have an agenda can push their thoughts to the extreme. And that is where we were caught. So what is the cause of COVID now? It is not the return of the old COVID. This is what we must understand. It's an Indianized version. It had the infection has adjusted itself. The bacteria has adjusted itself to the Indian model to spread more, because every organism has the tendency to spread, and COVID also has the tendency, and that's how it exploded simultaneously in 10 states. It's not that it got transferred from one state to the other. It autogenously got generated in 10 states at the same time. And if I give you the figures, you will be shocked as to how things move in a matter of just 5-6 weeks. In Bihar, as compared to March 1 as compared to March 1 to April 23rd, it rose up by 522 times. In UP, 399 times. In Andhra Pradesh, 186 times. In Delhi, 150 times. From 175 infection per day on March 1, it became 26,169 on April 23rd. 150 times. West Bengal, 142 times. Rajasthan, 123 times. Karnataka 72 times. It goes on. In Tamil Nadu 17 times, Kerala 14 times, Punjab 8 times. Nobody could have imagined. As Dr. Arun Kumar said, even the experts in their wildest imagination did not think that it would become a tsunami like this. So what does that mean? That this is an extraordinary situation. And this situation hit many countries in Europe. The same situation happened. In Italy, we saw thousands of people on the road. There was no hospital. People died, were removed in trucks. But everything is forgotten. India is focused. Because the Indians themselves mercilessly commented without the basis of fundamental facts about why this situation emerged. The fault is ours. No other country would do that. No other media would do that. In a way, no court would do that. All these unfortunate failures put India in a difficult situation. Is election the cause? Absolutely not. In Tamil Nadu, there are elections, but the jump is the lowest. In UP and Bihar, there was no election, but 400 times and 500 times was the growth. In Punjab, in Gujarat, in Telangana, in Rajasthan, there were local body elections in December, January, and there was no surge. Actually, the numbers were going down. So the states where the elections were not, there is a huge explosion, and 500 times. Where there is election, it is not that much. So elections are not the cause. Is Kumbh Mela the cause? Absolutely not. Because the Kumbh Mela began in April, but the surge began happening in Uttarakhand from March. But when they found it was crossing the limits in April, they suspended the Kumbh Mela. But the entire world media says Modi allowed Kumbh Mela because they didn't know the dates of Kumbh Mela. They didn't know the dates of rise. They didn't know Kumbh Mela was cancelled. Because facts do not matter. So we are caught in a situation where headlines is without reference to facts. And this time, particularly, the COVID situation in India is largely a middle class, upper middle class affair. It is in Chennai, where actually the director of IIT, Mr. Gurumurthy, sent me a message. Let there not be any lockdown now because it has not affected the ordinary people. In fact, if it had affected the ordinary people and ordinary people have died, the media would not have noticed at all. It is because significant people died. It became a news. Whenever a powerful man, whenever an influential person, whenever a wealthy man, whenever a very well-known man gets into difficulties, it's in the headlines. So it's an unfortunate situation that the government made policies for own oxygen production. And take how the opposition behaved. One of the most important advancements that this government made was to have gotten vaccine production as a national priority and got it done. How many countries were able to do it? India was never known to be a branded product producer. In the last 20 years, we lost the initiative to China. But this Prime Minister took it up as a priority, drove it on a 24/7 basis, got 2 companies to produce vaccine. This itself is a great achievement. And when he began insisting that you have this vaccine, the Congress leaders, Surjewala, Tharoor, Manish Tiwari, Jairam Ramesh, they shouted in chorus against Covaxin's emergency approval, and Anand Sharma went to the extent of saying it is dangerous. Chhattisgarh government said they will not use Covaxin. This is all happening in the month of February and March. People were dissuaded from going into Covaxin, which is an indigenous product. low priced, just 120 rupees per person. This was almost rejected. And only Rajasthan government said, no, we are not going to, we are going to stick to vaccine. It is only after the surge took place, all these fellows fell in line. And Rahul Gandhi even wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. What is this? Your vaccine program is going at a snail's pace. I mean, the Indian media would not even ask Rahul Gandhi this question. Gentlemen, till early March, you were preventing, you were creating reservations in the mind of the people about vaccine. Because of that, the vaccination program in India did not take off. We were producing vaccine more. The government began to export to the needy countries, to almost 180 countries India supplied. And of course, India has the responsibility to supply, but it did not supply starving the Indian nation, because in India, the vaccination program was not taking off for a variety of reasons. And the government study showed, which Dr. Arun Kumar also noted, only 23% of the people wanted to have vaccination, and almost 40% of the people wanted to wait, and 16% of the people never wanted vaccination. This changed dramatically in the end of March. 47% of the people wanting to have vaccine. People who wanted to wait, who were 40%, dropped down to 20%. And those who did not want vaccine at all, they dropped down to 6%. This is noted by Arun Kumar, because this was the extent of reservations created in the mind of the people by even a very respectable journalist who said Indians have natural immunity. What is the need for vaccine? Very respectable journalist. I don't want to mention his name because he happens to be my friend. So this was the extent of irresponsible discourse. And we don't even connect today's news with what happened 15 days back. For us, every day is a book by itself, unconnected to yesterday, and will never be connected to tomorrow. So this COVID crisis has made one thing, that every day 3 million people are getting vaccinated, whereas the average in the first 3 months was less than 1 million. Now we are vaccinating almost 90 to 100 million per month. Of course, we have vaccination shortage, which we manage. At least the people are now willing to come. And another thing I found is with reference to the way people became active. The Google mobility data shows that people came back to normal life. 78% people came back to entertainment. 87% of the people were in parks and public places. 92% in transportation. 122% of the people came back with more than what it was, what it can be, should be. And without maintaining social distance. You can't blame elections. You can't blame Kumbh Mela. And in Delhi, it is the highest. In Bombay, it is the highest. These are all public data. It is not supplied from many government releases. So we need to keep abreast of the facts to make the image, and we have to create a national will to face the situation in which the government alone will not be able to do. And we must also understand where India is in the context of COVID. Our death per million is, case per million is 14.5 thousand. That is 14,500. In Europe and US, it is 7 to 10 times more. The infection rate. The death rate between India and the Western countries is 1:5 to even 10. Our death rate is the lowest. I'm not saying Modi is responsible for it. There is something which is in the Indian gene, which is still protecting it against foreign invasion. India was not able to protect itself against foreign invasion. The Indian individual's body is still capable of defending itself against foreign invasion. Otherwise, there is no reason why the death rate in India should be as low as 1.2%. So it is not that India has not managed. The death rate is 159 per million. It is 12 to 15 times more in US and Europe. So now, why is it that India is a special target? India has always been an enigma in the mind of the West. It could neither reject nor accept India. And at least the 18th and early 19th century Western scholars had an awe of India, because the direction in which the West was going, the Western discourse, was not far-sighted. They were able to see it because the Western thought institutions were not durable. For example, colonialism collapsed in 150 years. Capitalism as we know it collapsed in 75 years. Communism collapsed in 50 years. Globalization is collapsing in 25 years, which means the foundation on which the contemporary world order is resting is not based on a durable philosophy. This was seen by great scholars of the West. I have listed them in my random thoughts. That in the 18th century, 19th century, they were able to see that India is having a durable philosophic model, and that is needed for the world. This is what two greatest historians, Will Durant and Arnold Toynbee, who were almost contemporaries, said. One, when India was still not free, and two, Toynbee after India became free. So, but Indians did not understand it, and why will the foreigners understand it? And so I would put it in three stages, how the Indian narrative by the West, we must understand it because we have to handle this in the contemporary context. So there are three stages of the Western narrative of India. One was religious, pre-colonial. Then colonial period was ideological. And the Cold War period was also ideological. And the third narrative, which is post-war narrative, which went totally against India, was on the basis of the balance of power, by which sans ideology, global relationships were framed, particularly with reference to China, and India and China became the comparative elements. That India was a democracy, that India is a free country, that India has much more in common with the West was completely ignored under the post-war balance of power, and they promoted a Frankenstein, and it has now gobbling up the West itself. The West completely failed to understand the civilizational factors which drive a nation. In fact, Guruji, I am amazed at the person's vision in 1973 in his last speech in Dishabodh in Thana. One question was asked to Guruji Golwalkar. How about China? Guruji was gasping for oxygen to speak. He said, communism is a passing phase in China. A Confucian China will emerge out of communist China with its empire building instincts intact. You look at the bunch of thoughts, it is there in the last part. That's precisely what happened. It's Confucian China. They have established Confucian centers in over 500 places in the world. They want to rebrand themselves as Neo-Confucian China. They have very clear view. They have to rule the world. It is not in any interest other than the fact, unless the world toes the line of dictatorship and democracy is made a secondary way of life, there is no future for China. Democracy should cease to be the yardstick to judge a nation. Otherwise, China cannot survive. Now you look at what is the state of the democracies in the world. Only 13% of the people live under liberal democracies. If India is added, the West is not very keen to add India as a democracy at all. Without India, it is 30%, 31%. If all countries which have some kind of election are put together, it is 46%. 54% of the world lives under dictatorship. And dictatorship has a vested interest in perpetuating it. And the leader of the dictatorship is China. And they can't, democracy threatens them. So they have to delegitimize democracy. There is a beautiful paper which was published by the Foreign Affairs magazine in last January 2019. Please Google and read it. Democracy and Disorder, in which they said even in Eastern and Central European countries, democracy is declining, liberal democracy is declining. They feel in the next 30 to 40 years, they may go into deep dictatorship. Liberal democracy is failing because of its liberalism itself, because only 45% of the youths vote in liberal democracy. Voting rates have come down in Oceania from 90% to 62, 63%. People have lost interest in public affairs. They are more interested in their private affair because you have got so much freedom, so much to enjoy, so much to earn, so much to travel, so much to entertain yourself. And that there are 3 studies which I have pointed out in the random thoughts, which is very important for the Indians to present India to the world. That without India, there is no democracy in the world. The Foreign Policy magazine paper says India is the only silver lining and golden lining of democracy. This is how we have to brand India. 100 difficulties you may have. If you have to survive, without us, you cannot survive. This is the position Indians should take. And we are proud about our democracy. Not only that, Indian democracy, the voting percentage has gone up in 1950 from around 50% to 69% in the last election. There are states in which the voting is 80% plus. These are all the facts which we have. And in the Western countries, it is the more educated, more wealthy, more knowledgeable, and more comfortable people who vote. The minorities vote less in most of the Europe. And uneducated people, less educated people do not vote. Impoverished people do not vote. The democracy there is a top-down democracy. You look at India, 75% of the minorities vote. 65% of the OBCs vote. It is only the upper caste who vote 50% and less. Degree holders vote 50% and less. It is the unschooled and secondary school who vote more. These are all there in that paper. I have brought it out. India is a top lean and bottom heavy civilizational democracy. We don't vote as individuals. We vote as communities. We vote as villages. We vote as groups. This is regarded as illiberal, but this is what aligns Indian democracy, contemporary electoral democracy, to the traditional democracy of how different communities used to live together. This is more durable. The Western democracy has become state dependent. Even the families are collapsing. Communities have ceased to exist because modernity was defined by Karl Popper, which was repeated by Margaret Thatcher, that there is nothing called society. It's a very dangerous formulation. So we must now present India as the only hope for democracy in the world. From the Western narrative itself, don't go for any Indian sources. Their own research, their own view, that the number under democracy minus India means China will win the war in the world, ideological war. China is no more a communist country. It's just a dictatorship, Confucian dictatorship with, they want to rule the world. You must stand up when they come. They don't want to go and invade and all that. That's a threat they may hold out against India. So it's a And Indian narrative is not very easy. And the Cold War narrative, which actually destroyed the intellectual foundation of the world by saying how much power one has and we have to balance it, and that's it. This is the Kissinger formulation, is an outdated formulation now, because so long as America was the superpower, it was able to maintain a superior balance of power. It is no more a possibility because it has created a Frankenstein which is overbalancing against America. And don't think Trump was an accident in America. Trump was an evolution. Trumpism is lasting beyond Trump in America because the American evolution felt that the 25 years of American formulation of itself and the world is a disaster. So we must have an overview as to why India, there is a Chinese angle to India. Why America became so close to China? Why Pakistan became so close to America? Because it is Pakistan which arranged from Karachi the secret flight of Kissinger to Beijing, where Kissinger waited for 3 days for an appointment with Choi Enlai, not to speak of Masatung. And this entire secret thing was arranged by Pakistan, and that is how Pakistan and America became close for the next 25 years. The Indian narrative changed because after Jawaharlal Nehru, there was nobody who would even look at India till the Indians moved towards Russia and they did the Bangladesh war, and that is a great thing that lady did. From 1971 to 1991, India was not in the map of the world. If the Indian Prime Minister went to America, I don't think any newspaper would give a front page publicity to that. We were ignored. We became a factor only in 1998 because we began to play the global power game, which we kept away from. So India paradigm shifted and it can no more be ignored. The problem, if India is ignored, nobody will even comment about the death in India. India is unignorable. And there is a body of thought in the world which is in our favor, which we have to leverage on, that India is necessary to counter China. It may be the Western perspective, but that we have to counter China is in our own interest. But there is a body of opinion which is developing in the world. We have to align it to democracy, and my paper I have suggested that democracy will be the fulcrum around which the world will move, as against commerce around which the world had moved in the last 25 years. Now there is no more the cheap global chain supply which will work. It is only the safe supply chain which will work. So we have to formulate our ideas on that basis. Now, suddenly Taiwan has become important. In 1979, America was virtually giving up Taiwan on that one country, two systems theory, which was sold by Deng to America. President Carter even went to the extent of saying that there cannot be two Chinas. And now Taiwan has become so important because they hold the future technology of the world, the semiconductor technology. The whole world, Western world, wants to protect Taiwan. Complete paradigm shift. That's where Quad has become important. That is why the Asia-Pacific region has become Indo-Pacific region. So these are all the plus points. The West needs India as much as India needs the West. So this discourse is the answer to these petty things which are being said about India in a context, which is humiliating, of course, but we should tell you are all idiots here. In China, if it happens, you won't even know about it. So we have to now move to a multi-dimensional strategy. India being so complex, it cannot be put into one narrative, which we understand. It is the democracy narrative. In their own research, in their own formulation, in their own understanding of how the world will be, we should present India. And Most important thing is most of the liberal democracies are weakening is the problem. And in America, you know the problem of how a nation is getting divided. It is because of the very concept of competitive liberalism. Without the foundation of society, family, non-political institutions, normative institutions being crushed under the weight of liberalism, we need the strength to project this. There are a lot of researchers. In fact, Harvard University constituted a religious freedom project in 1994, where they said that we have missed out what Swami Vivekananda said for 100 years. And we need to restate that. And they quoted what the journalist said at the time, that we need the best of everything from all religions, and we have ignored religion for 100 years. But that is in a corner. Those in the corner will have to be brought into the mainline discourse. It is possible today because the mainline discourse is so piffle. It's so baseless. It is so transitory. It moves the society, nation, world from day to day. This is where China is different. This is where Japan is different. This is where Russia is trying to be different. This is where all the democracies are failing to be different. But fortunately, India is not. With all the problems, we are able to hold on to great values of ours. And I can capture this in just like, if India has universal social security, which is needed in America, because this is what caused in 1980, 8 top economists, including Milton Friedman, they came together and a book, US Economy in Transition, was published, in which they said, don't bring universal social security because it will destroy the families. We have already taken over the kitchen through multinationals. We should not take over the families through government. A functionless family will not exist. Now you see the state of the families in America. If the same situation, if all earning Indians decide to disown their parents, their grandparents, their near and dear, what will happen to America, India? There will be no India. It is the families, it is the community, it is the social relationships, which is called the social capital today by as great a thinker as Francis Fukuyama. That is sustaining India, that is sustaining Asia. Atomized individualism is collapsing in the world. So a democracy which works with civilization is more important, more sustainable, more durable than a democracy which works with individuals. The day is not far off when some of the best people in the West will understand. And for that, we need to be a democracy, and we are. And we have to take over the democratic discourse. Your discourse is fake, transitory. Our discourse is important according to your own researches. You call us the silver lining and golden lining of democracy. So we should take over the democracy discourse and destroy these piffles of news which is demeaning and destroying our image. Don't go into explaining this. Make it a subset of a larger explanation that India, at least you know what is happening in India. You know what happened in Wuhan. They say maybe thousands of people were slaughtered. Not denied yet. They shut the whole city down and people were shut in their houses. Can it happen in any civilized world? But nobody will speak because Chinese influence in American academic and media institutions is so deep, so strong, so pervasive. There cannot be anti-American, anti-China news. There could not be. In the last 25 years only, something is coming out today. So we have our problems, but we have also a narrative which the West cannot ignore. Take democracy as the narrative of India. And a durable democracy, a tested democracy. A dictatorship was overthrown by electoral process itself. It's an amazing kind of performance by India in 1977. All this we should bring into the debate. Project India as the democratic model and sustainer and safeguard for the world, then make all this into subset. This is how I would suggest that we should do the discourse. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
भीष्म जी, आप कुछ कहना चाह रहे हैं?
आप बात करिए. Please go continue.
Thank you, Gurumurthy ji. It was really a thought-provoking and in some way really trying to redefine Indian democracy. As I've seen it also in one of the Shri Aurobindo's book, Foundation of Indian Culture, where he has 60-page essay on Indian polity, where Indian democracy, the original democratic model of India, how it is sustained in India for a long time. But for today's question, there are so many questions and comments I have from people, and it's very difficult to pick some of them. But I will try to see if I can bring some of the question, and so I pick up one question from here. Let me see. Mr. Bansi Pandit. So he's asking question, in February, the infection numbers were lower and there were plenty of vaccines. Did Government of India, local and central, did enough to encourage vaccination? Was it a missing opportunity?
I think I have answered it in the course of my lecture itself, that there was a campaign against vaccination in India by the opposition, because everything is political and people, they are afraid of the disease, and vaccination will cause heart attack, vaccination will cause this, this kind of, the experts were also so divided that in Israel, the heart attack rates have doubled after vaccination. That's it. Why India has very natural immunity? Why vaccination? This was the kind of discourse. So when people are susceptible to rumors and when they feel they have not got the disease, why will they feel they may get the disease tomorrow? It is only because of the surge in the COVID infection levels that people are now rushing for. Almost 3 million, sometimes it crosses even 3 million are getting vaccinated every day.
There is another question, I think, which is in mind of many people, and someone has asked here also, which in your discourse was different, but I'll ask this question. Is it a biological warfare by China?
See, it is very difficult to say, because I saw some Chinese scholars saying today it's not a natural creation. But tell you, the way America ruled the world in from 1950s to early 1970 and post Cold War, when nothing could be said about America. Of course, America is a democracy. Something may be said about America by Americans themselves. In China, it is not possible. Nobody can speak about or against China. So from such a country, in my paper I have said, Americans brought in China into the world trading system. Anyone coming into the world trading system is supposed to be a market economy. So in 2014, the US trade representative and European trade representative, they filed reports with the American and European governments that there is no transparency, there is no market system in China. So they filed a case. China is not a market economy. China said, the moment you accepted me into the WTO, the presumption is I am a market economy. If the WTO had given a judgment that China is a market economy, all European and American nations would have pulled out of the WTO. The WTO fell in line and said it is not a market democracy. You see any number of reports by Americans pleading for, almost begging for transparency. How can a Marxist state operate a market economy? Tell me. Market economy is based on information. What for Amartya Sen got Nobel Prize? He said market economy rests on free flow of information. He got the Nobel Prize for that by comparing what happened in China between 1957 and 1960. when 30 million people died of hunger and no one knew about it till Deng Xiaoping disclosed it in 1979. 20 years no one knew. But in India, if there is one hunger death in Kalahandi, the parliament will stop. Food will be airlifted. This is what Amartya Sen cited and said, for market economy to work, political freedom is a must. Why didn't you apply the Amartya Sen formulation, which was almost around the time when China was admitted into the WTO, to say, China, you are not qualified, because it was in America's interest. With the result, America has, in a way, lost the initiative.
There is another question by Satyaji. What is the role of One World, One Order Gates Foundation in Indian pandemic? This is in light of Italian parliament calling Gates as a vaccine criminal, engaging in depopulation and paralyzed thousands of children in India.
You see, this One World, One Order is the most unnatural formulation which even a semi-literate will not formulate. It is just not possible to pack the world into one order. The only order in which the world can be packed into is that it is a world of diversity, whether in nature. Take, for instance, the plant kingdom. You know, the entire cereal variety in Western countries can be counted in about 250. The rice variety in India itself, the surviving variety, is 25,000. The nature is diverse. Human beings are diverse. Their behavioral models are diverse. How can you have a world order which is the norm? It's such a foolish idea. But because it gets publicity, because some big rich man says that this is being published, otherwise it will be dismissed. Completely wrong. Every attempt to pack the world into one model has yielded enormous amount of violence. And I would ask all of you to look into one website built by Professor Ramal, Hawaii University. He worked for 30 years to build this website, which talked about how power kills. And he has estimated some 1.2 billion people at the maximum, 680 million people at the minimum, who have been slaughtered by human beings in human action against humans over 2,500 years. And you will be surprised that till the 13th century, India was probably the only exception where the slaughter did not take place. Because India accepted diversity. If you want to live like this, live like this. Everybody should live in the same way. It's such a foolish idea.
Another question from Dev Bhankarji. What are your thoughts on vaccine export policy? As of now, since most of the states are willing to take the vaccine, do you think if there is a shortage of vaccine or government is lacking behind in the supply chain of vaccine?
See, so India was in excess vaccine supply till March, even middle of April. But sudden surge in the vaccine interest in the people made the vaccine supply, vaccine stock as compared to the demand less. The government was exporting because it was looking at domestic demand and production and found there could be a substantial export, which will also enhance the reputation of India in the world, because poor countries were not getting vaccine supply at the lesser rates. You can see Pfizer and others' rates is unaffordable by the ordinary countries. So India did leverage on its position as a vaccine manufacturer. It's a good policy. But when India began, there was a surge not only in the cases, but also in the demand for vaccine. India opened up even imports. So import or export policy is also based on not just a government approach, but also what the market needs. Now only Indians have developed interest in vaccine. And so India is correct. When the Indians were demanding vaccine less, export it. When the Indians were demanding vaccine more, import it.
Another question is just Sumana is asking, journalists slamming the government, Modi directly in foreign media. Is it a high time to bring a law against media to report only accurate news?
Nowhere in the world it is possible except in China. And the truth is what the Chinese government says. I don't think it will work in any place. It never worked in India even before all the talk of modernity came. In India, there was a Charwaka, there was a Jabali, and 3 of our darshanas even rejected the concept of God. We could survive because of our Tarka Shastra. We discussed, we agreed, we disagreed. So we had a democratic ecosystem. So we in India cannot survive without a democratic ecosystem, and the electoral democracy is a byproduct of that. So in India, it is not possible. Mrs. Gandhi tried it and it was a disastrous failure. We have to live with the media lies. The only, you see, after all, Kali Yuga is a dark age where instant things will pick up, durable things will be forgotten. So it is the job of intellectuals and people who transcend and who have a helicopter view to look beyond what is happening today to tell the truth. The responsibility of people who are committed to truth is much higher in Kali Yuga.
Thank you, Gurumurthy ji, for enlightening us today. And there are so many people. I think there could be another 2-hour session just for question and answer. People have views more than question, and it could be very entertaining at some time. But at this time, I would request either Bhishma ji or Dr. Purohit to say word of thanks to end this program today.
Dr. Purohit ji. By the way, let me introduce Dr. Purohit ji. Dr. Purohit ji is our president of FISI in USA. Dr. Purohit is a heart surgeon and a very much in our company for a long time. And he has been with FISI for a long time. And of course, his brother is a governor in the state which just went their election, right? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Dr.
Yes,
Purohit.
sure.
Okay, thank you. It was a very enlightening speech I heard. It was very practical and learned the history of India and also the democracy, how it worked. And I think that was the theme of this speech, the great. And I think I thought that fake news only is in America, but I understand that fake news also in India as well, as I understand. So I think this, as I understand that this goes on for in democracy as well. And I think we understand that oxygen demand was much there, but there was a lot of production. I understand from India, also talked to my brother. He said, you know, why you are looking for the oxygen? He said, we got plenty of oxygen. We have got much more oxygen than we need. Only thing was the transportation of the oxygen from one place to another place. And suddenly such demand happened that it could not be transported. And eventually they got this system, they can transport now, so they have plenty of oxygen now. But initially, same thing happens. When there is an emergency happens, same thing happened in this country. The death rate is very high in first few days. And after that, things get under control. And I think things get changes. And I thought now the more production of the liquid oxygen in India, which I'm understanding is going on pretty strongly. And I think we're going to catch up pretty soon. And it was very enlightening speech. And thank you very much for giving such an enlightening speech. And we from US, we're really grateful to you. And we enjoyed that speech. On behalf of our Fiji, and also I belong to American Fijians of Indian origin. I'm the charitable foundation there. And on behalf of that, we are pretty close to the Fiji, and we really enjoy that. And thank you very much on behalf of Fiji and API.
Thank you. Dhanyawad ji, bahut bahut. Very
Thank you. Just one note here I saw from our Gaurang Desai ji. He remembers Gurumurthy's last lecture in 2001 on Fiji platform.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. बहुत अच्छा लगा. Very nice.
बहुत enjoy किया साहब.